All right, all. Welcome back to Complete Human Performance Radio. I am one of the hosts that does this show, Anthony Durazio, and today I am joined by my client and the head of CoachGarner.com, Dan Garner. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me. I love sitting down and talking shop, so I'm pumped for this.
Yeah, so Dan, I've been fortunate enough to work with Dan for a couple months now. He came to us wanting to do a marathon in 6 months while also having a newborn, exploding business, and just general busyness. And Dan, how would you say that's gone? Just to touch on that real quick, I guess.
It might not have been that good of an idea. I mean, we're we're looking back on it now, and I only operate on extremes. But damn it, I'm gonna finish the whole thing, man. It was my daughter was born in October, and I basically just had a goal of not being the guy who blames being a dad on being out of shape. So I just kind of wanted to be an example of possibility, but then also just a beacon of inspiration for anybody who needed it. Because I've just grown up with so many people that said, once you have kids, it's all over. And I couldn't hang on to that idea at all. I knew that wasn't gonna be me. So I set the goal to do something insane. And that's because I've been training. I'm 33 now, and I've been training since I was 14 years old. So, we're coming up on, so that's 19 years, getting close to 20 years of training now, and I've never been an endurance guy. It's always been strength and hypertrophy, powerlifting, bodybuilding, that kind of thing. So what I did to prove it to myself, but also prove it to other people out there, I was like, hey, first of all, I'm going to do some crazy shit. And it's also going to be something that I've never, ever, ever done before. So I'm going to drop everything. I'm only going to give myself 6 months to run a full marathon. Let's go.
Yeah, I would say so you have been in exercise in minimal effective dose. Um,
Yes.
is what I could absolutely say is because we've actually progressed really well. You've taken to the endurance work, really really well, and we're going to get you through that marathon. I know we're a couple weeks away, but we'll get you through it. And yeah, I've actually been impressed with like how little time we've been able to steal away from your other responsibilities and commitments. How well it's been going. So hats off to you for sticking to it and believing in the process on my end. It means a lot. And yeah, we'll get you there. It's fun stuff.
For sure. Yeah, and for the listeners here, Anthony's been an absolutely awesome coach because it's been a less than ideal process so far, as you can tell. I mean, I've had extremely busy business ventures at this point in time, and then of course just having a newborn with the lack of sleep there as well. So things have been wild, but he's adapted to everything along the way. I've gone from zero endurance to last Sunday, so 2 days ago, running 20 miles and not being tired. So we've come a whole long way thus far, and Anthony's the man.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. So enough about our training relationship. I'm having you on because you have been, I would say, fortunate enough. Sort of, obviously, you've earned it. But you work with a lot of top end athletes. I don't want to say their names because I don't know about privacy stuff, and I know some of you posted, but some you don't. I know, but some I will just say some very very top level athletes that many of our listeners out there would, if we named them, you would absolutely know who they are. Um, and one of the things that you post a lot on Facebook, and one of the things that you've sort of promoted a lot with, and that you work a lot with, is gut health, and how gut health and the microbiome is so, we're learning more and more about it, is so important in terms of athletic performance, uh, you know, everyday life, brain health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't you tell our listeners, why don't you introduce them to what the microbiome is? It's why it's important to gut health and sort of, I guess, the higher level stuff, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So basically, let me take a step back even further and kind of explain as to how my process. is gut related very often. So what I do, I've worked with a lot of people, right? Like he mentioned, I've worked with Olympic gold medalists and Olympic silver medalists, 2 Olympic bronze medalists, 2 WWE champions, 3 Super Bowl champions, 2 UFC world title winners, PGA tournament winners. Basically, you name it, player of the year. I've worked with tons of people, actors and celebrities, and basically this process that I do operates upon the fundamentals of the theory of constraint. So a system will only ever perform to the degree that it is constrained. That's how physiology works. A system will only ever perform to the degree that it is constrained. And let's say an athlete, their constraint is gut health. So be it an infectious state, let's just stick with infectious state. Let's say they have a gut infection here. A system will perform to the degree that it is constrained. So this athlete often will seek out visible ways in which they can improve performance and recovery. So they will do, maybe they're stuck at this plateau. So they'll add in meditation. They'll add in a breathing routine. They'll add in a sleep ritual. They might make manipulations to training volume, intensity, and frequency. They're going to do a lot of, frankly, really great things that would increase the potential at which they could have got results. But a system will only ever perform to the degree that it is constrained. So what I do is I actually do a massive data collection process. So I'll have my athletes fill out 7 different assessments and questionnaires. And then I also have them complete 7 labs. So the 7 wasn't chosen for some weird marketing thing. That's just how it happened to lay out.
Right.
It was 7 questions and questionnaires and assessments, as well as 7 different labs. And I'm looking at blood, urine, stool, saliva. I'm assessing absolutely everything in their physiology. And a good coach will be able to identify an athlete's strengths, but a better coach will be able to identify their constraints. So that's what I do. I look at the entire molecular portrait of this athlete, and then I identify what constraints are currently in the way of that athlete becoming the best version of themselves. So when I'm speaking to athletes, I call them performance anchors. I'm looking for those performance anchors because if they've got a constraint, it's basically like tying an anchor around your waist and trying to go to the gym or go to the field or go to the rink every single day and perform. You're just not going to perform to your potential. So I identify that constraint and I remove it, and then that person is going to reach their true physiological potential. And a real beautiful thing happens there, from a coaching perspective, because I'm removing rather than adding more complexity to them, which is makes for a very adherent process. But then also, you get a psychological, emotional, and physical benefit from it as well, because physiologically, in the absence of constraints, they're able to adapt much more efficiently to the stimulus that they're placing themselves on in their training. But from a psychological and emotional perspective, they thought that this constraint was their genetic limit. So that's what I do. I actually remove this constraint and allow them to increase levels that they didn't think that they were capable of. And that's why people come to me at that level, at that really high level, where getting an extra 1% better can be the difference between a multi-million dollar contract or a world record or a world title. In my world, 1% is 100% because it means everything at that level. So what I do is definitely not for everybody. Not everybody needs to do all the labs, all the questionnaires and stuff like that. But at the highest possible level, precision matters. And why I explained all of this is because you would be amazed at how often people have issues in their guts. It's like that's become, I'm not the like gut health guy, but a lot of people know me as the gut health guy simply because I'll post case studies on Facebook and Instagram of lab work where I've removed a pathogen and this happened, or I'll post case studies on inflammation being rooted within the microbiome, or I'll do whatever that is. And it's basically just a reflection of my practice. But people don't really recognize that it's a reflection of how many people have gut problems. So many people, like just asking you, Anthony, how many clients or people do you know have gastrointestinal symptoms? Whether it's bloating, farting, discomfort, how many people?
I mean, I would say most everyone like probably has
Yeah,
at least some of those symptoms.
absolutely. I mean, when it comes to bloating, discomfort, gas, diarrhea, constipation, these things are all very common, but they're not normal. There's a big difference between those two words, because what's common, that's just the average population. You don't want to be an average person if you're hiring a coach. You want to get out of average. But people, the barometer for what health is has been lowered simply because so many people are unhealthy now. So clearing a room with your farts is like considered a normal thing. Having intermittent diarrhea or constipation or bloating, or waking up in the morning with abs, but being so bloated at nighttime that you've lost your abs at that point in time due to distension. People have these problems constantly. And a normal, healthy, physiologically functioning person should not have those problems. There's a difference between normal and common. And so many people kind of keep these dormant stressors, or these hidden stressors, or performance anchors, however you want to itemize them as. They will have these dormant for a very, very long period of time. And that can manifest itself into constraints that I identify in labs. And that has a rippling effect on everything. So, like when you ask me about the microbiome, in a roundabout way to answer that question, the microbiome impacts everything. The gut impacts everything. But the microbiome, just to provide some like crazy context, it's estimated that there's 5 to 10 pounds of bacteria in your gut. And for context, your liver weighs about 5 to 6 pounds. So from a weight perspective, these things are microscopic. From a weight perspective, you have more bacteria hanging out in your gut than you do your liver. So that's an organ, as far as I'm concerned. It's not considered an organ, but it should be considered an organ because it impacts your protein oxidation. It impacts digestion and assimilation. It impacts your mind so much that there's this new terminology in the literature known as the psychobiome. It impacts so many different things. So I just think, I don't know where you want to go with this, but the way in which I have come to be an expert per se in gut health is because I've seen it so often and I've had to deal with it so often that it's way more common than people think. And when you fix your gut, I don't think people realize what kind of results you can get afterward.
Well, so I think that's a great introduction. So I think the direction I want to go is for the obviously you tend to not work with sort of typical average athletes like myself, but in the average population, right, what is the most common gut microbiome issues? Is it not having the right bacteria? Is it having too much of the wrong bacteria? Is it a combination? Are there common patterns you see, or is it sort of very individualized what the particular issue is?
It's typically going to be either a transit time problem, a infection problem, or an inflammation problem. So those are probably going to be your top three issues between transit time with infectious and inflammation. And any one of those can be a problem, whether you're a top end athlete or a average general population person. From my own research, and I've done over 1,000 labs on people, and I don't say that to be dramatic. I've really done over 1,000. I would estimate that 30 to 40% of people have some type of infectious state in their gut that they have no idea about. So I would probably say that infections is probably the number one thing that people deal with, whether that be a subtle dormant infection that people are just characterizing as normal, even though it's common. It's not normal. That's something that's incredibly common. But in the world that you and I are in right now, inflammation is very common. So if somebody is an endurance athlete, there's actually research done all the way back in the year 2000, I believe. It was from Zuckendrup. Actually, I think I have his textbook. Yeah, I've got his textbook right there. Zuckendrup, all the way back in 2000. He did excellent research. Just quantifying what was happening with triathletes. And 93% of triathletes post race had gastrointestinal symptoms, and 68% of them had measured blood markers of endotoxemia. So, bacteria leaking into circulation that should not be in circulation, creating a ton of inflammation. And post race, there's an inflammatory marker called IL-6 that's representative of extreme inflammation, and it goes up 27x post race, according to this study in 2000 by Juckendrup. So IL-6 goes up 27x, not 27%, no, 27x so above baseline. So that was like really fascinating seeing that data come to fruition. We got 93% symptoms. We've got 68% endotoxemia levels. We've got 27% increase in IL-6. And then 12 years later, and this is going to be very important for everybody listening. 12 years later, there's a study done by Lampresci et al. And they did, and this is a double-blind placebo-controlled trial where they controlled diet and supplementation. So it's beautiful, beautiful research. It was across 14 weeks, and consuming a probiotic with only 2 billion CFU, so only 2 billion active ingredients within the probiotic, was able to reduce post-workout protein oxidation. So these people remained more anabolic, and it also reduced an inflammatory marker called TNF alpha. So it was able to halt TNF or inflammation production compared to the controls. And it was also able to reduce a hormone called zonulin by 20%. And zonulin's a hormone that actually opens up junctions within the gut, creating what a lot of people know as leaky gut, but what's more professionally recognized as intestinal permeability. But this is a probiotic that reduced inflammation, reduced muscle catabolism, which is a lot of people don't know that, and reduced zonulin, which is a hormone connected with intestinal permeability. So important things to kind of care about here is exercise does create inflammation, which is a good thing. But inflammation is kind of like a campfire compared to a forest fire. You want a little bit of inflammation to create the stimulus and adaptive process, but you can't have a ton of inflammation that turns from a campfire into a forest fire, because that's going to end up burning the whole house down and creating a whole lot of problems in physiology. And the second thing that's important to draw from that is it was a 2 billion. It was 2 billion. There's supplements out there now that are like 50 billion, 100 billion, 200 billion, some absolutely wild doses that people take without even having labs. This is a very simple Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium bifidus strain, which you'll see like in Walmart, you'll see it anywhere. 2 billion was able to create that type of net outcome. So that's just something I think everybody can take away with, whether you are a professional athlete or not, is that more is not better. And gut is connected to a lot of things that you just simply don't know are connected to, such as, inflammation and protein oxidation, for example.
Very cool. If someone was out there and they're listening to this podcast and they were like, man, I have gas, right?
Yeah.
What would be what would you tell them like the first steps to take to address that problem?
Sure. Yeah. So your possible areas of dysfunction in terms of labs can be very, very complicated, but there's a lot of simple things that you can approach here as well. So if somebody has a lot of bloating and digestion or just any kind of gastrointestinal complaint, stress is one of the number one things that causes that. The stress is you can connect it to freaking everything, but it does have a major impact on basically everything. It's like when you look at stress, if you want to play like the most boring game in the world, try and find an ailment in physiology that stress isn't connected to. Stress is connected to absolutely everything. And it's been demonstrated in research that distracted eating, as well as eating when stressed out, reverts blood away from the GI tract and results in poor digestive capability. So if somebody is eating in front of the TV or eating in front of the computer or eating while driving or eating while extremely stressed out, these are all situations that are asking for gastrointestinal problems, primarily because stress lowers hydrochloric acid secretion. If you lower hydrochloric acid secretion, that happens in the stomach, which is the first digestive organ that food enters. And if you lower hydrochloric acid secretion in the stomach, I mean, a whole host of things can happen because now it is more sterile. So pathogenic species may not be destroyed in the gut, in the stomach rather, before they enter the small intestine, where they're going to thrive after that. But your hydrochloric acid, when it's very low, hydrochloric acid is what breaks down protein. So if we have low hydrochloric acid secretion, we're not going to be properly breaking down our protein. We're possibly letting pathogenic species through our stomach as well. And that all just began with the mind. So, distracted eating and lowering stress will absolutely improve your digestive outcomes. You don't need any lab to tell you that. Another aspect is eating slow. One thing I put on all of my clients' meal plans is eat slow and ensure each meal lasts a minimum of 20 minutes. That's always on every single one of my sheets, because that eating slow, there's a whole host of things that happen. As you can see, my brain, when it comes to this stuff, just because the gut is connected to so many things, there's like a Pandora's box that opens when questions arise. But eating slow, it helps you regulate your appetite, and it also helps improve digestion, simply because you're increasing the surface area of the food. It's easier for the gastrointestinal tract to break down. So if you just imagined two dishes, one dish had a big steak in it, and the other dish had ground beef in it, and they're both put in an acid solution. Which one's going to burn up faster? The ground beef, simply because it's got more surface area. There's less thickness of it for that acid to break through and turn into something that can be uptaken by the circulatory system. When you have a steak in a plate, that acid's going to take a long time to get through the whole thing, simply because there's less surface area for the acid to bind and connect to. So only a small percentage of the acid is going to be able to work compared to the ground beef. And that's why so many people, especially like huge, 300-pound bodybuilders, a lot of them lean towards a lot of ground meats in order to simply eat more, for the same reason they choose rice over potato. It's just so much easier to eat over the long term. And eating slow increases that surface area, and that will dramatically improve appetite control and overall digestive capability. So when it comes to stress and eating slow and stopping yourself from doing distracted eating, these are all things that have huge impacts on gut health before you would ever need a lab test. But if you're doing all that stuff and then you still have problems, I think that it's time to get some labs.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because now I can tell my brothers there's a reason I eat so slowly.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it drives
this
my
is
wife insane what I do.
yeah, I'm terribly. When I was growing up in an Italian household, we had family dinners, and I was always the last one to finish, just because I ate very slowly. Um,
Yeah.
so something I actually want to just ask, mainly, mostly for myself, not so much for our listeners, is how common. We hear a lot about. You mentioned acid in the stomach. We hear a lot about people having like acid reflux and high amounts of acid in the stomach. How common? I'm just asking because you might know this. How common is having too little acid in the stomach? And the reason I
Very
ask
common.
is actually a personal reason, is because I noticed with myself, I have a very difficult time eating plain white meats. So like plain chicken breast, plain turkey breast. I will basically vomit it back up. Is like in like a congealed kind of mucousy form. But when I eat stuff with sauces, especially any sort of tomato sauce, I'm completely fine. So I've gone to pretty much eating everything in some sort of tomato sauce, which works for me. Being Italian, it's fine by me. But I've kind of come to my own conclusion that it's probably a low acid issue for me personally. But I could be wrong.
Sure.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah. So my brain would immediately go two ways. And I think this is great that you ask a question like that, because I think case studies and stories are the best ways for people to learn and see how this kind of stuff works. The first thing I would ask you, when you ask me how common is low hydrochloric acid secretion, I would answer that question with a question: how often do you come across somebody who's stressed? Right. That's that pretty much
Right.
all the time. Okay, people are stressed constantly, and this is very, very well established that stress reduces hydrochloric acid secretion to the point where stress can actually give you bleeding ulcers. So it could have nothing to do with your diet at all. Stress alone can give you ulcers, and the reason why it does this is because stress in and of itself reduces hydrochloric acid secretion. But the body is the ultimate conservation machine. And there is a huge layer of mucus protection between your stomach lining and the acid so that that acid never burns your stomach and creates an ulcer. But when you start secreting a lot less hydrochloric acid due to your stress, the body, being the ultimate conservation machine, says, okay, well, I don't need to make this much mucus protection if we're only going to secrete this much acid. So I am actually going to bring us mucus layer protection all the way down to here. And then let's say you pick up meditation, or if you have a great night's sleep, or you got a raise at work, and then suddenly that acid secretion goes up one day, and then bang, that results in an ulcer because now you don't have the protective layer to protect yourself from your own acid secretion. And that's why like anxiety can be, I've seen anxiety have real insidious effects on people's gastrointestinal tract, because anxiety, I mean, some people have it chronically, but a lot of people kind of just have anxiety, you know, when they go to bed at night, or it's an anxiety attack. It's something, people with anxiety, it's just something that kind of comes in waves rather than constant. But that wave is a suppression of hydrochloric acid, but then an increase, and then a suppression, and then an increase. And then that can create a whole lot of havoc on one's physiology. So you telling me you have low HCl, I'd be first kind of be looking like, okay, Anthony, what can we do to help lower systemic stress on physiology? That'd be kind of pathway number one. Pathway number two would actually be to do a stool analysis, because there's a bacterial infection known as Helicobacter pylori, and Helicobacter pylori, that's one of the few bacteria that can actually survive in the stomach. Almost all, when I say there's 5 to 10 pounds of bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract, almost all that's in the large intestine. It's a huge amount of it's in the large intestine, because very few things want to live in an acid bath. But Helicobacter
pH
pylori
2 isn't so awesome for most things.
no, Helicobacter pylori is like that weird guy at the party that no one really wants to talk to rather, but everybody wants to talk about. But you've got Helicobacter pylori, and it's in the stomach. But the thing is, Helicobacter pylori doesn't even like how acidic the stomach is. So one of its mechanisms that it has in its toolkit is to increase alkalinity within the gut. So it'll actually reduce the acidic state in the stomach. So why? Because it's setting the barometer to what it's comfortable with in terms of survival, because bacteria have evolved right alongside us. They've got many crafty ways that would really blow the viewer's mind with respect to, you know, how they fight antibiotics, how they survive against sanitation, how they survive all kinds of stuff. They've evolved right alongside us. And Helicobacter pylori, it can actually down regulate the acidic environment within the gut to allow itself to thrive better. So when someone has low HCl, that can absolutely be a result of a Helicobacter pylori infection as well. So my brain kind of goes, let's look at stress. My brain also kind of goes this way and says, maybe let's do a stool analysis and check out Helicobacter pylori. The third and final test I would do with you, that it kind of sounds like you do well with tomato sauce, so that's interesting. But I would actually give you a major protein meal. So a protein meal of a large quantity relative to your current intake. There's no like set amount for everybody, because that doesn't make sense. But relative to your current intake. And the reason why I would do this is, and this is going to be a long explanation, but I promise that it'll provide a lot of value for people. What happens if you don't have, let's use your chicken breast example. If you eat a chicken breast and it hangs out in the stomach, and you secrete, these are just arbitrary numbers, if you secrete enough hydrochloric acid to digest 90% of that chicken breast. So 90% of that chicken breast gets broken down into peptides, polypeptides, brought down into the small intestine to be further broken up into amino acids and uptaken into circulation. Great. 90% of that chicken breast did what it's supposed to do to get Anthony jacked. That's what we do. But the remaining 10% is still there. And protein is going to be, or anything rather, but protein undergoes putrefaction. So it actually putrefies. And everybody hates that word, but that's the word that when bacteria eat protein, the protein is putrefying. If bacteria eat fat, that is rancidification. The fat's going rancid. There's terminology that all sounds nasty, but there'll be 10% leftover chicken breast in that gut that will begin to putrefy, because the bacteria want to eat that remaining chicken to get it out of physiology and to give themselves a meal. Now, bacteria, like us, also poop. So bacteria will actually eat this protein and then poop out something called indole. Now, indole is incredibly toxic to physiology. So your body will say, holy crap, I don't know where this bacteria poo called indole came from. So we've got to excrete it out of the system. So your body will actually undergo biotransformation to convert indole into a safe compound known as indican, and then you will urinate out this indican. Why that's important is because a urinalysis can pick up indican content. And indican is only ever there if you're not properly breaking down your protein. It would never exist unless that putrefying event happened. So when I give somebody a big protein test, that putrefying process, that will create bloating, distension, gas. It'll create a lot of things, actually, you hear when people say they have the protein farts. These things aren't random. That stuff happens, and it's a test I use in my practice. And then if that came back, if they had a very reactive meal or a very reactive symptomatic state post high protein meal, then I would probably at that point call for a urine analysis to see if we could pick up some indican in there. And then, I'm certain we could create a consensus. Okay, H. pylori, stress, indican metabolism, what's happening with this client. And that's really what the labs and questionnaires are for.
Awesome. Very, very, very cool. I had a question. Now it's escaped my mind. Oh, I know what it is. So sounds like lots of good things people can do, some simple things they can do before they feel like they need to go actually get lab work done. As we mentioned earlier at the start of the podcast recording, you talked about working with higher end athletes. And we kind of mentioned this before we started recording, and I thought it'd be fun to return to it. Working with high end athletes, I think, is always an interesting experience. Mainly not only to see what they can do, but also what they can get away with, or some of them are able to get away with. What has been your experience, working with such top end athletes in terms of, I'm sure some of them are very diligent about, diet and training. Have you had an experience where some are just, you look at what they're eating and it's just rubbish? It's like what you definitely tell people not to do, or has it been one or the other, a mix?
Yeah, I mean, it's mixed for sure because you do have your dedicated people, but the word athlete could be replaced with compensator. Athletes are the ultimate compensators, whether it be, what we would call poor biomechanics, yet they are the top athlete in the world. It's like hang on. I might be wrong on this one.
It's funny you mentioned this because there's a girl from University of Kentucky that just set the second fastest 200-meter indoor time ever. I was talking about it on CHP Sports, which has already come out if you're listening to this. But the way she runs, her right arm does this real straight. It does almost like when you're watching, it looks kind of weird.
Yeah,
but she's the second fastest indoor person ever.
Yeah,
So it's like one of those things you're like, that looks strange. She shouldn't be doing that. But it's like, who am I to tell her not to do this thing when she's the second fastest ever?
Dude, that's how I feel when I look at YouTube and it's like how to squat properly. It's like, dude, you look at the top 10 squatters in the world, they all squat differently. Like you're making me a video as if there's one way to squat. What are you talking about? So
go down, come up. That is pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, hang on a second, Dan Green and Eric Lillybridge, I don't think you're doing that right. Yeah, it's like, hold on, Chad Wesley Smith, stop right there. I know. Yeah, I know what I do is 30% of your 1 rep max, but let me tell you something, you're doing it wrong. Okay, so they'll compensate no matter what, though. To get back to that question, one thing that you'll find working with pro athletes is they will compensate in terms of biomechanics in the most amazing ways possible. And they'll compensate also in terms of mental toughness. And that's kind of like where I come in and why I actually do love using labs with them. Because if you tell an athlete, hey, take a deload, take the week off, they're going to say, I feel fine. I'm fine, coach. I'm good. Let's go. I want to train. Like, especially with the UFC fighters I work with, holy, like what they can endure purely out of insane toughness, physical and mental toughness. It's what people think is overtraining is laughable compared to what you see these guys do and still freaking come back the next day and do the same thing. It's amazing what they do. But I like, again, to lean on labs a bit that way, because then it's not me telling them they need to stop. It's their IL-6. It's their
Right.
8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. It is their CRP. It is, I'm able to kind of lean on these things so that it's not me telling them that they need to stop. It's the lab telling them. And it's also an emotional exit for them to not feel like a wimp for taking a deload, because they know, oh, okay, well, that's the chemistry. So I've got to listen to the chemistry. It's an out for them too. So yeah, they're unbelievable compensators. People have no idea how much of a role that plays. Like, I've got an NHL player who actually, he didn't do strength and conditioning until he got to the NHL. That's how gifted he was.
How is that
Zero.
possible?
It's very possible, my man. Dude, I worked with an ex NFL player who is 71 years old. He had a testosterone of 1100. So for people so people understand this, yes, natural, 100% natural. Testosterone is typically anywhere from 3 to 900. And if you're above 600, dude, you're waking up with morning wood and you're ready to rock and roll. That's like around 600 and up. He's 70 and had a testosterone of 1100 with zero drugs. And this was even in the presence of high inflammation and a deficiency in magnesium. He still had high testosterone. So what happens in physiology, I've got so many wild stories like that of just, and that's kind of why my labs are different. Like, I don't review the labs of a bunch of normal people. I review the labs of wild people doing wild things. So it's been a wild career for me so far, but I've been able to develop my own KPIs that don't even exist yet in the research.
That's really, really cool. Yeah, that's the high end of like HRT. Like, my God.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Actually, he wouldn't even mind me saying it. It's Mean Joe Green. It was Mean Joe Green. So he's a legendary. He was a part of the Pittsburgh Steelers
I'm not
legacy.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, his name's Mean Joe, right? I did his training and nutrition for over a year. We lost about 80 pounds, I believe it was. But yeah, his initial first lap when he first came to me with inflammation, low magnesium, all that, and in his 70s, 1100 testosterone. Dude is an
Do I want to
animal.
know what it was like after you worked with him?
I don't think we retested on testosterone,
Okay.
unfortunately. I think he just did. I think we just did that first run, and the second one with basic blood chem, because he didn't care
I
about
mean,
his
it's not like he
testosterone
needed
because
to
it was
test it
there.
again. Like,
Yeah, exactly. There's no real. That would have been for me. I'm like, no, I
yeah,
want to test your
I'll pay
testosterone.
for
This
this
is
one. This one's on me.
yeah. This is now an experiment for my own information. Yeah. After that, we were more looking at other performance indicators for him.
What so now that I'm curious, give me two other the wildest things you've seen in labs. Obviously you don't need to name names, but just two other the wildest kind of like things where you've just sat back and be like, is this like you did a double take basically?
Yeah. So I've had someone just recently in 2022, they were taking a melatonin supplement that said 5 milligrams on the label. Their
Okay.
labs came back 1,000x the upper range limit of melatonin content in physiology. 1,000x. So not 1,000%, 1,000x melatonin. So this is someone who came with extreme fatigue,
You
and
think?
that no, they were under sedation. So what was
Yes.
happening? Yeah, the dude was taking in almost a gram of caffeine every single day, and
Oh my
but
God.
because he was taking the caffeine, it was screwing up his sleep, and because his sleep was screwed up, he was taking more melatonin,
More
and
caffeine.
whatever the heck was in that melatonin was not meeting label claims. It was insane, dude. The half life to get his melatonin back to normal is still happening. It's still happening. It's coming down, but his
God.
body's still breaking it down. It's ridiculous, dude. So that's one wild one I've seen. Another wild one I've seen is a parasite, actually. This is a world-class jiu-jitsu competitor. He is complaining of knee pain, and pretty much everyone he talked to was like, ah, dude, you do jiu-jitsu, your knee's going to hurt. Like
Right.
that's of course, yeah. So, but he's like, no, I'm a black belt. I've been doing this for a long time. This is something different. And basically, no one really listened to him. So then he came to me, and I said, all right, well, let me see your poop. So we did a stool analysis, and then I found a Blastocystis hominis parasite in there, and I was like, okay, we got this parasite, and this is actually, you learn on the job this way. You got
Right.
a Blastocystis parasite in there. And sure enough, I go into the literature, and it's associated with inflammation and rheumatoid arthritis in the knee. So it's
That's
knee
wild.
specific, yeah, knee specific inflammation. And I eradicated that parasite, and then his knee went back to normal. So like this wild stuff, like to kind of tie it all the way back to the beginning, you're like, what is the gut involved in? It's involved in pretty much anything that you can talk about, because I've removed a parasite to improve knee pain in a jiu-jitsu competitor. I sound like I'm insane, but I've got the before and after lab analysis to prove it. That this stuff is out there. And I think a lot of times, the way in which I'm able to get results with people is because I listen to them. That's kind of like the story that I get a lot. Is nobody really listens to them, but I'll continue to ask questions and do assessments, and I'm big on like having less people to work with so I can give them way more of my attention, and that's because those people have the budget to work with it that in that respect. But I keep digging until I find the answer, and that was a wild answer that worked, and his knee pain was gone in 30 days. It was insane.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm actually helping to teach a parasite ecology class right now, and it's parasites are just nuts with what they can do. Um,
Yeah,
and I think it's yeah. I mean, we all have them, right? The issue is, I mean, how badly are they affecting you, and
yes,
how much are you going to invest in trying to sort it all out,
yep,
and how much damage will you do to the healthy part of the microbiome to get rid of this parasite that it's really not doing all that much to you. Everyone
yeah.
pretty much has it anyway. Just leave it, kind of thing.
Yeah, there are some that are commensal. Like you can actually live with a parasite and be fine. Like you just said. Like people react to it so differently. The big tag I like to look for is actually eosinophils. So in just like a basic blood chemistry, if you have elevated eosinophils, that's associated with a parasitic infection. So if eosinophils is low and you have, say, some form of parasite, it may be commensal. It may actually not be irritating your immunology. It may not be a problem. But if you have cleared immunological distress and then also the parasite, it's probably something that's reactive for you. And in a basic blood chem, you can look at eosinophils for your first hint.
Yeah, no, it's wild. Very, very cool. Um, well, I think that's enough for your first time on. I'm sure we could probably have you on in the future to discuss more crazy stories. If someone wanted to follow you, Dan, or get in touch with you, how could they do so?
Sure. So yeah, I post all the time. I post case studies. I post new research, my own thoughts on things, and I'll let you know. I speak 100% from the evidence, so I'll always let you know if something's my opinion or not, and you'll see that on my page. It's extremely research focused, and where I would shoot people is really just at Dan Garner Nutrition on Instagram. So at Dan Garner Nutrition on Instagram, and then from there you'll be able to find all my other stuff.
Yeah, Dan's great. That link will be posted below that tag. But also, I've always learned stuff from what Dan posts. He posts a lot of all the literature that he's getting his sources from on his Facebook. So it's a great source of information, even if you're not necessarily trying to be as expert level as Dan is. And I would say, he's operating at the cutting edge of the research. So obviously, it's not for everyone. We don't all have that sort of time, and we're focused on other areas. But it's good to see, right? And it's good to have. I always like to say, it's good to defer, at least in the absence of your own knowledge, to an expert in the field, or at least to use their viewpoint as a starting point. And I would say Dan definitely qualifies. So go make sure you follow him. Dan, thanks so much for coming on. It was great having you.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity, man. That was fun.
Awesome. We will see you all on the next episode.